Right Pack Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media for writers by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, president of Winding Trails Media, and president of St. Louis Writers Guild. And with me today is my lovely co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe, paranormal romance author under the pen name Kaseka and Vita.
Melanie Kulani, author of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and recently out, Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. You can find me talking about poisons at 3 o'clock on the 9th of July at Central Library in St. Louis, and I'm doing a breast cancer benefit on the 12th of August. So you could come out then too, to Patrick's in Westport.
Brad R. Cook, author of the steampunk adventures, the Iron Chronicles, such as Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and soon-to-be Iron Lotus later this fall. Check out A Clockwork Heart. And on July 9th, I will be talking to St. Louis Writers Guild about Point of View at their workshops for writers. So check me out and then head over and check out Fedora.
He's in the morning, I'm in the afternoon.
Exactly.
It's a perfect
Perfect day. Yes.
Perfect day of writing.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Lee Savage, writer of erotica for the Truly Wicked, and I have a new campaign going out. You can find it on Facebook, Lee Savage #Erotica Speaks. We're trying to represent erotic authors, community, and the empowerment and education. So check us out. We're actually calling for people to help us with the content.
And my name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator, and currently insanely editing my own work, so it might be a little ragged.
And the name of that?
I'm giving her a blessing here. Go ahead.
What's the name of that work that you're editing?
And my fantasy, my young adult fantasy novel is called Threadcaster. Thread like Screencaster. Like
Love the title.
Thank you. I'm proud of it.
And today we're going to kind of start walking on some eggshells. We're going to talk about writing about genres, dramatizing issues of gender, power, and society. And I say we're walking on eggshells because I've always talked about on these episodes, you never want to push away your audience, and this is something which all our fictions are really based on, but it's a trick of how to put out issues that are in modern day or in the past and show it without pushing away that audience. So,
Well, I hope people are empowering genders,
I hope so.
both men and women,
Yes.
in their books.
And if you haven't, you can check out our back issues,
Yes.
back episodes, in which
Yes.
we talk about those things.
So with that, how do you intertwine, I'm going to just jump right in. How do you handle issues, social issues, and how do you intertwine them into gender roles or power or social structure in the stories you write? Don't everybody jump at once.
I find this question funny because I'm a
Okay.
trifecta of minorities, so most of the characters that I write deal with these things as part of their normal life.
You are.
can
You
go.
kind of like are a royal flush of minority.
Yes,
You
yes,
got all
I
of them
am.
dealt to you.
That line in Pitch Perfect I've used already talking to people. Sorry, go on.
I try to create stories that show women in a powerful situation. And because I write erotica, I try to show that there's no shame in how they feel or what they want. If they want 3 men, they can have 3 men, as long as that's all consensual. So I try to show that there's power, and I try to put not my females in the damsel in distress that has become the traditional romance that the damsel has to be saved all the time.
Since we're talking about our specific ways that we like to address character, I like to vulnerabilize my male characters a lot. I just like to give them a human base. You know, what's their greatest fear, and have them face it in a not macho kind of way. And I love a sensitive guy in my stories too. If it's a romance, it's nice to have the man not know everything going in.
Well, I was gonna say, you've heard me talk about this before, but I really like writing powerful females, and I don't like writing, a-holish dudes as good guys. I like them as bad guys. That works really well.
Yeah.
But I think, to be honest, like in today's day and age, I think we have to write empowering genders, and I don't just mean that as we have to write empowering women. I think that's something we all do in this room. I don't think any of us write doormats.
I can hope.
But I think it's important not just to show women against anything that's been written before, but just in terms of the way society is. We're all kind of about building people up now, as opposed to tearing people down. Given, I guess, which side of whatever argument you fall on, not to get political or anything. But we do tend to write a lot about empowering people. It's kind of a trope of today.
So our topic is dramatization of issues of gender, power, and society. And from when I was very young, the idea of power and who has it and who doesn't, and the imbalance in relationships based on who had more power was always fascinating to me. But Jen, I kind of want you to talk about your society in Threadcaster, because that is a perfect little example of the dramatization of issues where power in a society is so imbalanced, and the information, not just the power, is in the hands of very few who are using power for their own gain.
Well, thank you for that segue there. I can talk for this entire time about my novel if you want me to. I'll try my best.
And now we will begin the episode on Threadcaster.
On Threadcaster, yeah, we can have one of those later. I based sort of the power structure in Threadcaster on a Reformation era Catholic Church. The idea that magic, in my case, there's a scriptural magic is like a god power. So there's scriptures and magic and things that are supernatural are hoarded by the clergy of the world, and then they're doled out to the common man with just as much as they need to get the common person to do what they want. They do this to scapegoat their responsibility and all the bad things that happen in my world. They do it to victimize innocent people, to take the blame for them. And they do it very effectively because they run all of the generally downtrodden local peasant characters. Like our average guy lives in fear of upsetting this huge overhead god power in all the ways that the clergymen, the brushcasters, tell them that they can. It's like, oh, well, you have to do this or else you're going to get punished through circumstance. You have to do this or it's your fault that everyone else suffers. That kind of thing.
I think it's interesting that in your story, as with I think a lot of stories, like the Hunger Games for another example, the people in power, the people with the most power, are not the good guys. They're in it to keep the status quo that they created, to make a little utopia for themselves, but everybody else is living in
dystopia.
It's a dystopian trope, that's true.
Yes, to draw from the article here that I can't see the name of.
Yeah, we should name drop the article where people can find it.
Yeah, what started this idea for this episode is an article written back in 2015, published in The Writer magazine, Kicking Down Fences with Margaret Atwood. By Gabriel Packard.
So one of the things that I was noticing in the article is she was talking about utopias and dystopias, and how there is a little bit of utopia in every dystopia and vice versa, because some people are sitting pretty in every kind of world situation. But in Threadcaster and in the Hunger Games, we don't like the people who are living in their own private utopia because they're ignoring the plight of the other people in the world. And the story is told from the point of view of one of those people who is living in this other world. So, why do you think it is that we so often see stories told from the position of less power?
Because we like to see someone work hard and achieve a goal. So, while it is interesting to tell the story from the other side, someone in power realizes that their power is corrupted and they have to change their ways, or something, Ebenezer Scrooge-esque in that. We like the underdog as Americans, especially. We really like the underdog. We like the story of someone starting from nothing and building themselves up. Just look at the rap industry.
What industry?
The rap industry.
Started
They all
from
started
the
from
bottom.
nothing and now they got chains.
Yeah.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah, so that's a narrative that's very. I mean, that's the American way, isn't it?
Yeah.
You show up as an immigrant, or you can start from a handful of change and become a big businessman.
You can be cleaning floors in your stepmother's house and wind up marrying a prince and being queen of the kingdom.
Exactly.
Cinderella.
So it's a it's a narrative that we like because we like to feel like we can accomplish our dreams. We can reach our dreams and accomplish our goals.
That's
So
very
we
much
like-
the American dream.
Yeah, we like to follow heroes who do that too. And as we say American dream, we're Americans obviously here, but that dream is a human condition kind of dream. Like everyone wants to be able to live the life that they want, and sometimes you have to overcome adversity to get there.
You've been patient.
I want to bring this into the world in the realm of what a writer might use, and that is something that Jennifer touched on the very first time that she talked. And it's simply the stereotype. We, of course, use stereotypes very often as writers for minor characters that are there for a minor kind of purpose to further a bit of the plot, or just because they need to be there for some practical sort of reason. But that's not what we want for our prime characters, because if we use them as stereotypes, then they're pretty boring because they're exactly what we expect. So we have to break those stereotypes in order to create any kind of conflict or any sort of interesting character.
I want to bring up Tropes versus Women by Anita Sarkeesian.
That's a web show, by the way. Google it, it's on YouTube.
Yep, you can find it under Feminist Frequency as well. That's the YouTube handle she has, and I believe the website. And the Tropes versus Women series of videos are 6 short videos about basically explaining tropes that we commonly see female characters portrayed as. For example, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, the Natalie Portman character in Garden State. Or we see some problems with pregnancy because the woman can get pregnant and therefore something creepy and alien is growing inside of her.
Using pregnancy as a body horror.
Or we see women refrigerators, which is basically a woman gets killed off screen and that serves as a motivator for a male character to have a character arc, and it's great. His wife and child and daughter usually were murdered, and then he goes and gets revenge, or becomes a better person, or becomes a superhero. So,
Or all the above. Go ahead, sorry.
so that series of videos is short, and she's also doing a longer set of videos called Tropes versus Women Video Games that examines tropes that we see there that we often see outside of video games as well. It can be really disturbing to see things that are completely normal to our society in that kind of critiquing sort of light. So that is highly recommended. What I brought it up for was when we're talking about gender, there are a lot of tropes that we have for women, and usually they're not something that serves women, whereas tropes that we see a lot of men embodying are more power fantasies for men. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you make sure everybody's empowered in whatever you're writing without diminishing one gender or the other?
Well, I gave a talk similar to this at OzCon not long ago. Basically, it all boils down to the fact that you have to take gender and sexuality, English, as as almost as like, I'm not going to say as a sub-trait, but it's a secondary trait to the humanness of your character. You write your character based on how they perceive their own identity, what they fear, what they love, what drives them. And then that is the soul of any person. A human soul is one that, has fears and loves and goals and dreams. And then you apply to that kernel of soul the outside influences, and one of them is their specific gender or sexuality and how their culture around them treats them in regards to that. So you have to start with the kernel of humanity first. That's your character. And then the gender cultural trope that surrounds them is something that affects that character. It beats on that character. It's not all they are. The woman is not just a woman first and a woman only. A woman is a human being who has a goal and a dream and a hope, and then sometimes the fact that she's a woman is going to prevent her from achieving that goal. Or perhaps the fact that she's a woman is going to help her achieve that goal, or something like that. Being a woman is part of her toolbox to achieve the goal, but the goal is who her character is. Or is part of her character.
And mentioning toolbox, and since I've just been watching Agent Carter, she uses that very well and this has been brought up in past shows, is because she is ignored, that allows her to achieve much more. And if you haven't watched the episodes or the TV shows, go back and try to find the streaming versions of it if you can, and catch up. And that shows you exactly how she took what was given to her and used it towards her advantage.
What's Agent Carter?
It is the Marvel Universe TV show called Agent Carter, showing back after Captain
the 40s,
America.
yeah.
After the
Was-
40s part of
It's the
Yeah.
40s. Yeah,
But
she's
before he was brought
Late
back,
40s, early 50s.
when he did
before he was found as a
SAS,
popsicle and defrosted.
Before we...
I was just going to throw out real quick, please go sign the petition. We're trying to get her on Netflix because the show got canceled. So please go sign up and try and get her on Netflix. I don't want to lose my Peggy Carter.
Yeah. We need
Even
to...
though she died in Civil War.
Yeah.
Yes, but she died at the age of 100.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
so.
same though. She died in Civil War.
And I did not know the show was canceled.
I know, it's a horrible thing. It's
I just finished season 1.
Season
I'm-
2's good. It doesn't stop it. Keep
Okay.
watching.
Is
Yes.
there a
I'm
cliffhanger?
safe.
Is there a cliffhanger at the end of season 2?
not
really.
Kind of, but no.
You're both
There's a
terrible
hook.
people. That wasn't convincing.
There's no main plus cliffhanger.
Yeah. The main plot got solved, but they were alluding to some cool stuff for season 3, and
And then it didn't get.
Well, we may still get it.
You know
I'm
why
hopeful.
it wasn't it was a woman, I'm sorry. It stars a woman. And also I like the show. That was like double death for it.
To get us back on topic,
Yes.
if everyone listening can rewind to my point that I made the last time I opened my mouth, I wanted to turn the table a bit and just address something that is close to my heart, the fact that the same sort of kernel of humanity needs to be at the center of your male characters as well. Like that's a thing that really upsets me, is when I'm seeing a male character who's being treated like a slab of meat just because he's male, and he's not allowed to have any sort of an emotional arc, because guys aren't allowed to be weak. Big boys don't cry.
Gaston.
Yeah,
They all have to be
I hate that
alpha.
because my male characters, and by my male characters I don't mean the ones I write, I mean the ones I love. My male characters that I've taken on as my host of children that I pet and hug, all of them are showing a certain vulnerability because they all feel like real people to me. So when I sit here and cry about how upset I am that Wash got the shaft in Serenity,
Literally.
Ha, ha, ha,
Yeah.
that's funny.
it's because I
Ba-dum-bum.
feel like I've lost someone that I know. Would I be that upset if Conan the Barbarian got the same end? Not really, because we don't get a chance to get to know him as a person. We just get to watch him punch things.
The Crom.
The reboot was a little bit better.
A little bit better.
Yeah,
Not super
he
horrific.
showed a little bit more emotion, and there was a little romance in there. That one.
Well, it's
There was romance in the first one, kind of.
kinda.
Here,
They-
have
they
this jewel. Love
they did
me.
it much better in the redo.
But your male character should have, in addition to goals and all these positive traits, they should also have fears and emotions and things that are driving them, that aren't just get the girl or get the power, or become king, or live up to my father's example, which tends to be the case in a lot of these sort of hero knights in shining armor type.
I think they're almost even more likely to be the villains. Look at all those movies on Lifetime where the guy is just absolutely terrible. But we don't get his backstory to speak of, or even if we do, it's just kind of in passing. It's not internalized. Okay, why does he drink? He drinks, and that's why he beats her up. Well, why does he drink? Because he doesn't have a job. And why doesn't he have a job? It's because there are no jobs available. And why does that make him feel bad? Because he's supposed to have a job and he's supposed to support his family.
So he beats them instead.
Yeah, because he is so frustrated that he has no good place to go. And so this kind of thing, it doesn't play well in the movies. And so we end up with, once again, a lot of stereotypes.
I want to come back to this after you're done.
In Lifetime movies, it's not just the bad guy. Even when the man is ostensibly a good guy character, it's like, okay, all right, well, let me just watch something else. This is.
Well, it has a lot in, kind of a weaker romance story too. There's like the good guy who has a puppy, and then there's the bad guy who hits his girl. Like, the only way that we can show how men feel is by having them hurt other people. This guy's bad because he kicked someone. This guy's bad because he raped a woman.
Stereotypes. Again.
Yeah, instead of having us see that he's bad by understanding that he's bad, It's like, it's a shortcut. Kill the puppy. Kill the dog. That's a shortcut. Instead of having us actually relate to and feel with these people on the screen, just do something that makes us generally upset, and then it's like, oh, he must be bad.
Well, and this takes me to the threshold of the question which I wanted to ask, which is, how do you avoid, in your writing, or in writing that you've seen done well, avoid the throwing the stereotype? In Lifetime, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on it, but Lifetime is notorious for what we just talked about.
Well, it's because they don't take a lot of time to think.
I wasn't going to say that. But how do you avoid taking the stereotypical cardboard character and the issue and just throwing it in the people's face instead of luring your readers to read a story that you're writing about that may be about a social issue or power issue or gender issue or whatever?
So what you're saying, how do you bring readers in?
How do you bring readers in without scaring them away, without slapping in the face going, this is a social issue, pay attention, you should be doing this here. Go ahead.
Well, one of my favorite ways is by flipping the stereotype. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. We were just talking about all these tropes and stereotypes for male characters or, for female characters. If you flip that on its head, then you're doing the opposite of what's expected. Instantly, you've created something different.
And more interesting.
So, on that level, it's one way of doing it. I mean, there are other ways you can do. You can take traits that wouldn't necessarily go with that guy and infuse them into him. One of my favorite characters out of the Avengers is Vision. One of the reasons why I love Vision is because he's massively powerful, probably one of the most powerful Avengers there is. I mean, he can pick up Thor's hammer. Let's talk about that. But then on the other hand, he's this really sweet, nice guy who is, not really going to hurt a fly in any way, shape, or form. And then on top of all of that, he's not actually a person. So he's got so many different layers to him that in the end, you've created this really whole, cohesive character. And I've liked Vision, God, for years and years and years now.
Long before he became one we knew.
Yeah, long before Paul Bettany got to him and made him awesome.
Right.
And you reveal these characters bit by bit, and they might all be a little bit startling, all of the little bits that you reveal, until eventually you have a more complete picture than you started out with. Even if you start out with a stereotype, you don't have to stay there.
I think that was actually something that Joss Whedon used in coming up with the idea for Buffy. There was always a stereotype of the blonde cheerleader walking into an alley when a monster comes in and only the monster walks out. And he was like, I see that, but what if the blonde was the most dangerous person in that alley? And so began Buffy. I do want to address the whole, if your question earlier, David, about bringing readers in and introducing them to social issues through your fiction. If you're going to do this, please do not create a message character. They're not real characters. They're cardboard cutouts that are perfect just so you can kill them to make everybody feel bad for this person, usually who is gay in the stuff that I was reading.
I was thinking of Rent when you were mentioning
Yeah,
it.
Yes.
Angel,
Named
Angel is
Angel
perfect.
on purpose.
In Rent, in case you didn't know, there's a perfect character that everybody loves. I believe the internet lingo would be they're a perfect, beautiful cinnamon roll or something.
It's a precious cinnamon roll too good for this world.
Yes, and that's literally what happens. Angel dies, and everything is awful, but you now like gay people because you've seen someone and loved someone who is gay, and therefore you've learned something.
Oh, and just for people that aren't familiar with this, Angel in Buffy isn't gay.
No,
That-
we're
that's
talking
a
about.
We're talking
Wrong,
Rent.
wrong, wrong, wrong story, yeah.
Yes.
Rent.
Angel and Rent.
Yes.
No thanks.
Even Neil Gaiman has done this. He had a transgender character who died, the only character that died in that volume. And then they got to see the character in heaven, and she was finally in a female body, and she was happy. But the gay transgender person died. They had a Green Lantern comic that was like groundbreaking because there was a gay character that you had met before, but he gets beat up and put in the hospital because he's gay and he was walking with his boyfriend. So all these comic book geeks now know that gay people are people. And I think there's a certain amount of the whole message character that's important for certain time periods. But really what you want to do is you want to make them well-rounded characters because you will love those characters long after anything potentially bad happens to them. And I would prefer nothing bad happen to them. If you have a good character, you don't need to kill them to make a statement.
Write Dumbledore instead.
Yes, right, Dumbledore. That comes back to my kernel of humanity.
He died.
He did die,
Thing.
but not till long after you realized.
When you have an issue character, you know, I don't know who in the room has read A Fault in Our Stars. I know a lot of us have seen the movie, but the main character, Hazel, she talks a lot about Cancer Kid books. The Cancer Kid is this, in the books, and it's a great contrast because she is written as a real person who happens to have cancer. And it's about a person coping with having cancer. She talks about these Cancer Kid stories and how she can't relate to them because the Cancer Kid is this, oh, doe-eyed angel, oh, don't worry about me, Mommy, I'll make it through, don't cry, Mommy, and then they're all, you know, this character is blown up into an issue character. You know, this symbolizes the innocence of someone who didn't ask to have cancer, as opposed to the reality that is Hazel, who is kind of pissed at having cancer. She's upset that she's not going to live to be old enough to live these lives that she's watching. She sits around watching America's Next Top Model for hours and hours and hours because she doesn't see any point to trying to go out and live a full life because she's really just waiting for the cancer to come back and kill her. You know, you're writing from a person who has to deal with this issue versus writing from an issue that is an embodiment of a person.
Going to the Cancer Kid, I've always loved the Asthma Kid from every story, who literally sucks off his inhaler non-stop throughout every moment of either the movie or the story or whatever.
I'm experiencing some form of anxiety.
Yeah, you know, and it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And as an asthmatic myself, who was quite acute, it basically was something I had to overcome through this weird stereotype that everybody had. That A, I couldn't do anything, or B, that I was going to suck off my inhaler the entire time. And anyone who knows, who's been an asthmatic, knows that OD would be kind of weird. I mean, you start to feel weird and go through all kinds of weird, shaky stuff if you suck on that thing too much.
If you need to use the inhaler that much, you need to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, no
Very
kidding.
much.
Like calling you out, Goonies, Sean Astin. But seriously, it's not cancer, but it's an asthma kid.
That raises a really good point, I think. It's good to want to include characters who are different, who are other than yourself, because if someone had asthma and was writing as someone with asthma, they wouldn't do that, because they'd know better. So it's good to include a lot of different character types and people in your stories, but if you're going to include a character who has something going on in their lives that is different from your own, especially in a significant way, you need to do your research. Because if everything I knew about asthma came from TV, I would think you always have to use your inhaler. Like,
But I
did
walk
you get
around with it in
surprised?
my
Oh
hand.
my gosh, asthma attack.
You can't have asthma. You don't have your inhaler in your
Exactly.
He dropped his inhaler in the forest. He might die on his way home. Like,
Yeah. No, you will die on this
And the
way.
problem is it makes a joke of something that's incredibly serious. You can't actually die from
Well,
an asthma
if you
attack.
go in for an
but-
asthma
Yeah.
attack, they treat it as like a top level emergency.
It
you
is.
can't get because they need an airway. That's
Yep.
like rule one in an emergency situation. You need to establish an airway. And if you don't have one, then you jump right to the top
I've
of the list.
never had to wait in an emergency room in my life. You know those long waiting room things that apparently exist? Never had that.
See, I've had to, but not when I went in for asthma.
yeah, when I went in for that, I was immediately seen. I was like, I thought you had to wait hours in emergency rooms. Nope. Apparently, it's just with certain things you wait hours.
No, and there's nothing crazier than, because, you know, as an asthmatic for years and years, I've had tons of attacks. And you're watching all the nurses and doctors scurry at top level like you have a gunshot wound.
Yeah.
And they're running around like mad. They're having conferences and everything like that. And you're just sitting there trying to breathe. But it's always amused me because it's like watching being the center of chaos, but being that still center, that, you know, calm center.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say if you want to write about something that you're not familiar with, research great. But then once it's finished, give it to a beta reader that's of that group, whatever your particular group is.
If at all possible.
If at all possible. In fact, several would be better if it's central to your story. If it's just a secondary, or secondary plot, then maybe one will be enough. But if it's the central person of your plot, you want to get it right.
All right. So I have a question for the group to answer.
Okay.
If you would like to write about a character, there was a question to me at a panel once. A person raised their hand and said, I want to write about a character in a wheelchair, but I'm not in a wheelchair and I don't know anyone in a wheelchair. What would be your advice to her about that? And if she has no experience with this wheelchair character, should she even write it?
Well,
Go for it.
Um, that sounds like a tough question, but fair and could extend to a lot of different things. So, for the wheelchair specifically, I would go to a hospital. If this person knows any doctors, anyone who is connected with people who would be wheelchair bound, it would be good to talk to people who are experts in it or who could get them in touch with experts. Another thing is, I could write people on crutches before I use crutches, but nothing compares to actually having to use crutches. Like, you find out there are parts of your body that hurt that you wouldn't have known if
Yes.
you hadn't been using them.
How easy it is to fall?
You realize that certain spaces that you can navigate easily when you're not on crutches are far less navigable. And I think the same thing goes for a wheelchair, probably to a greater extent. Like, it would be good if they might be able to go to a hospital and borrow use of a wheelchair.
You
for
can
an hour.
actually rent one by the day. It's only about $3 a day. So rent one for a week and actually try living in there. Maybe even put a little alarm to make sure you can't just jump out every time you want to.
Interesting.
But that's specific for a wheelchair. That's a common thing people do for students that are learning to become physicians to teach them empathy. They have to either put on foggy glasses to simulate vision problems or sit in a wheelchair for 3 days or just to teach them empathy and figure out some of the problems these people really have.
Also, I know for people who write mystery stories and who, I know some people will get a group of police officers together and treat them to dinner or something and just have them, tell stories about what it's like day to day or, So there are things that you can do, but I think you have to figure those things out and do your research.
Anything you can do to experience it yourself is a good thing. But that's not going to give you everything. I mean, yes, you can spend time in a wheelchair. It's a really great way of learning. However, that's not going to teach you everything. You don't have to pull yourself out of the wheelchair and try and get yourself into bed and in and out and do all that kind of stuff. You're not going to have the muscle development of somebody who's done that for years.
Or the cultural
You know,
adaptation
exactly.
of living as a wheelchair-bound person.
You know, you're not going to be sitting in every situation where you have to look up at everybody and everyone's looking down at you. You know, so I think one of the best things you can do, obviously, is a ton of research, but stay away from the tropes. Stay away from what is the stereotype of a person in a wheelchair and move out of that. I mean, one of the reasons why the asthma kid is always seen sucking on his inhaler is because that's all anyone knows about asthma is that people with asthma have inhalers. So obviously I must use it to breathe.
Yeah.
You know, every moment with every breath. You know, so if you can stay away from that kind of stuff, you know, like the cancer patient who, you know, yes, they live cancer 24/7. You know, I have friends who go to cancer camps and they are, you know, help out cancer kids and all this kind of stuff. It is something that they deal with all the time, but at the same time they try and get away from it as much as possible and live a normal life and do something a little bit normal. Yeah, they're going to get tired and things like that, but if you can escape that stereotype and still write the character, you know, true, and we've talked about that in past episodes, perhaps the past episode, but yeah, so, you know, staying true to your character is an important thing, but if you can avoid the stereotypes and kind of move past that and do a little bit more, you know, people who have, you know, different diseases, you know, and you can do a ton of research out there. There is so much now with the internet that you can do to find out about these things, and you can try and get some personal experience, and you can talk to people, and you can do all these different things, but avoiding those stereotypes is probably your best bet for creating a genuine character.
If you were going to write a character with Crohn's disease, which I have, based on Crohn's disease commercials,
Yes, don't ever go off a commercial.
you would not have an accurate depiction of someone who is living with Crohn's disease. Because anyone who ran into me on the street would have no idea that my intestines are destroying themselves. It's not something that it's like you have to look for a bathroom every 5 seconds like they show in the commercial. The commercial is showing a dramatized, that's not the way you pronounce that word.
Dramatization?
Yeah, it's a dramatized version of a concept, not an actual representation of a concept.
I'm not sure which of you two ladies were next, but
Oh, go ahead. I'm
maybe after
going to
that.
go somewhere else.
She was
Okay,
the
mine was advice, or specifically to the wheelchair. You know, you mentioned the hospitals. Another way would be to go to a nursing home.
Yes.
There's lots of old people. They're all in wheelchairs. They're all short-handed. And there's a lot of people that are lonely there.
They wanna
So you
talk
could
to
get lots of stories there. You could even volunteer and learn how it is to move people around with probably very minimum training that they would do because they need volunteers so bad. So just a little, you know, way. And if you have a will and a way, you can find whatever you want and what you need. Just do a little research and you'll find the places that would be available for you to do that.
yeah, I know you're gonna jump over me, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I can't think of the name. I can't remember for sure who wrote this, but it was a series. I don't know if Charlene Harris wrote it or someone else that's in that vein. But the main character of the book was getting psychic visions. But this all started happening after she was struck by lightning. And the thing is, her depiction of what happens to survivors of people that are struck by lightning is actually pretty accurate. And she actually just, you know, she did a lot of research and
She wasn't actually struck by lightning.
no, she did a lot of, and she actually, you know, reached every disease out there has an association. And she reached out to them, and
The Lightning Survivors Association.
I forget what it's called, but there actually is one. And she had all sorts of, you know, basically neurological damage. And it was consistent with what other people wrote. And really, some doctors don't believe it's real. Frankly, almost all those side effects are also the same side effects you can get with electroshock therapy, so I definitely believe people can get those side effects.
A shortened version was I'll say, because I want to turn it over to Fedora, who's going to take it a different direction. Brad hinted at this, I think in a way it's been said in a lot of ways. Whatever the condition of that character, somebody in a wheelchair, somebody in one which I personally know from a lot of friends of mine, hearing impaired. Everybody, there's social issues around their situations, and to be able, trick is anything you're gonna write, get to know the people as best you can. but know how they see the world and know how the world sees them.
Mm-hmm.
Learn it from both sides. I will mention this, okay, I'm going to get on the soapbox and I'm going to try and jump off of it. So this is not soapbox, but just a perfect example. In the hearing world, we are pushing cochlear implants.
Mm-hmm.
Because, hey, who would not like for people to hear? But what, unfortunately, and from the deaf point of view, from how, as I understand it, from what's been told to me, is when, especially with kids, when a child has been given that cochlear implant, they don't see the hearing community really embracing that child, so they're still not part of the hearing community, and they are no longer part of the deaf community, which does have its own social culture all to it. A whole different language. Their language is not English. Their language, because the English did not like the Americans at the time, is French, based on French sign language. So it's a whole different aspect, whole different culture.
It's a completely different sentence structure.
It's a whole different sentence structure on top of it. And the deaf community really are, for the most part, how do I put this? Not exactly the most trusting of the hearing community. And they have their reasons, and I can't say I always disagree with them. So really get to know the community, get not just online, as Jennifer said.
Mm-hmm.
Dig deep, go into that community. See if they let you in and learn about them from all aspects. I'm going to turn this over to Fedora. Sorry, that was longer than I expected.
If you're talking about empowerment, I think that almost necessitates you're talking about something that would offend people, because they're the ones who are lacking the power, right?
Mm-hmm. They don't like to be reminded of that.
Indeed. Well, it seems to me that you could do worse than follow an example of a fellow who did it better than anyone else. That fellow was Mark Twain, and the book is Huckleberry Finn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did he do it? Two main things strike me as being important, being really key. One was the use of contrast. Take, for example, the character of Jim and the character of Huck's own father, who is a drunkard and just a miserable excuse for a human being. While Jim, the black man, is his real father figure in the entire piece. So that kind of contrast suggests, but doesn't beat you over the head with the fact that the black man who loves his children is really the much better man than the old drunk Finn father.
Mm-hmm.
The second way is, of course, the use of humor, as he pokes fun at things which are not at all funny.
Mm-hmm.
The feud, for example, and the girl who wasted away because she couldn't decide how many arms to have on her weeping poetic figure. It's just absurd. It's beyond absurd. It's funny. In other words, the book is so entertaining that even though the messages would not have been very happily received by many people who read the book, they get the message and would go ahead and read the book anyway.
One thing Mark Twain did that I misunderstood why he did it when I was first familiar with Huckleberry Finn as a child. He uses a word that currently, let's just say he doesn't use the word Negro, he uses a slang term for that.
He uses the N-word.
Yes. And when I first knew about the book, I misunderstood the reason why a certain character was always called N-word Jim, because I just thought that was the way Southern people talked during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, I realized he did that so the reader couldn't forget that this character is not like them, is not white. If he hadn't done that, a lot of the readers would have forgotten that Jim was white, that Jim wasn't white, wasn't like them. But by doing that, he tricked or forced a lot of white people to see slaves as human beings.
It's been a long time since I read the book. I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize, well,
You have to get an older copy.
yeah.
It's been edited out since then.
Huh.
Yeah.
You have to get the original version.
I wanted to bring up another author that we talked about in the previous episode. Charles Dickens did a lot of, played a lot with power and who has it in society and who doesn't, and why, you know, certain people should be protected. For example, children in factories. So, would any of you like to address how he did that?
Well, he makes you love Nancy and then have Bill Sykes kill her in a hideous way. So that he
Which book is
does talk about the plight of women.
It's Oliver
In
Twist.
that's in Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
I was going to mention at Great Expectations, something I've noticed in that book, struck me at the time. Pip, as a poor person, is generous. In fact, he's too generous. He's too trusting. He's too nice. When he gets success, he becomes a complete jerk.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the book, where he's nice and middle class, he's a reasonable person. So in that book in particular, it seemed like the more wealth you got, the more terrible you got.
That's very much something that Dickens was trying to say.
And there
Yeah.
is a TED Talk that will explain why.
Yeah.
It's called "Does Money Make You Mean?" And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Even if it's Monopoly, the answer is yes.
Monopoly's a horrible game, yes.
It's a family destroyer.
Exactly. But I was going to say, actually, Dickens, and one of the reasons why I do this is because of Dickens, but in the Iron Chronicles, one of the things I play with is classism. And I play with it on several different levels. I play with it in the sense of I have a Sikh character who's, you know, part of the class system of India. I have, you know, my noble characters. Even the good versus bad, it doesn't matter. They're noble, they're rich, they're of a status, and they treat people differently. And then I have my lower classes, and they get treated differently for specific reasons, and, you know, kind of thing. And it runs through all three books. And part of the reason why I did that is because, yeah, one, it's a Victorian trope, thanks to Dickens and others. But, you know, is a way of showing that, you know, this does exist. It still exists to this day. I mean, what is it? There's like 63 people who own the same amount of worth as like 6 billion people or something like that.
Maybe 5 billion.
You know, but
That's
it's...
not making it better.
Yeah.
It's really
you know, but we still live in kind of that society of where, you know, money, as you were saying, money does do something to people. Very few people become truly altruistic.
I think it's good that you did bring up class, because that's one of the issues in question. It's a matter of who has power and who doesn't, and often in our day and age, that's determined by who has money and who doesn't. Hunger Games was beautiful in just how they portrayed it visually. Visually, you could tell who was rich and who was poor by what they were wearing, and the people who were filthy rich living in the capital, they look crazy.
They have
'Cause they're
dresses that
dressed-
catch on fire.
They dress themselves in such a way that you know they're dressing for the height of fashion. It's completely impractical. And then you see people from the districts, and you're like, someone needs to feed these people, and they need a washer and dryer and clothes.
We live in this society now. Look at New
We
York
do.
Fashion Week
I
or
was
something
thinking
along
about
those
that when I
lines.
saw
Couture.
Hunger Games. I was like, this is us now.
Yeah.
Like, the districts are most people, and then the capital is the super rich, and they're completely different worlds.
No one in Missouri walks around in couture. Everyone here is walking around in a t-shirt and jeans.
And I don't think anyone would accuse the Hunger Games of being a message book. It's a good story first and foremost, and yet it brings to light that, and it also allows us to see our own society in a little bit of a clearer way in some ways, just because of we can see them and then we can see us.
Classic dystopian trope.
Something that I wanted to bring up that I'm not super familiar with it because I haven't actually researched it because my stories so far don't do it, but the idea, and I'm going to mispronounce it, noblesse
Oblige.
thank you. No, and I heard that defined casually, not by an expert, as the rich's attempt to keep their wealth from destroying their moral character. Basically, it's the idea that those with stuff have a moral obligation to do good to those with not, and they can certainly do it condescendingly. Sorry, I can't pronounce that either. But I liked that idea. It just made me think of, I wonder if that was at least part of the reason why, I know the Vanderbilts, one of the Vanderbilts was really big on giving away money because he thought the wealth would destroy his family and destroy his children. Bill and Melinda Gates have put most of their money into a foundation, and their children are still going to be in the top 1% when they grow up. But almost all of the wealth is going to the foundation and not the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I totally lost my thought.
Something about noblesse oblige.
Yeah. Give me a second, I'll be back to it.
Okay.
Did you have something? You had your
Well,
hand
I was going to. Well, we can take a little cul-de-sac while Brad thinks about his plan. Kathleen mentioned the concept of an issue book.
Mhm.
Issue books are very popular on shelves nowadays. They went through. There was a time when people like agents in New York were putting up on Twitter that they were looking for books about cancer kids. It's kind of the post Fault in Our Stars effect, that they're looking for people that are sick or hurt or amputees or something like that, a real world otherness issue, and write a book about humanizing and culturalizing them, and it's become a little bit overwhelmed, the whole thing. So
Market saturated?
yes, there's a lot of issue books on the shelves, and I just wanted to I don't know, just throw that into the middle of the room for everybody. What do you think about issue books?
However, it is still something that separates out what would be just classical, like, popcorn genre fiction where you're just supposed to, ingest it, have fun with it, versus, the books that tend to make it to the New York Times bestsellers list, which do have that some sort of issue or some sort of light they're shining on, some sort of plight or something like that. So I think that, issue books, and not necessarily true issue books, books that touch on issues, will always kind of be around. I think there's something that almost separates common literature from what we consider, literary literature and stuff like that.
But without Oprah to tell us which,
I
what
know.
are we going to do?
I don't know. We still don't have a new Oprah, but I came up with my
got a
point.
television network, man. She's good.
So anyone who BEA was probably at the time that this comes out a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of some of the things, BEA is the Book Expo America, and it's one of the big industry conferences where a lot of books get sold. One of the things that came out of all the talks about BEA and the notes that have kind of rolled out through the workshops is that books about rich people aren't really doing very well. It's not something that your average reader relates to anymore. The Dynasty effect is over. A Dynasty being a soap opera from the 80s where everybody, lived the glamorous life and everything like that. And yes, the Kardashians might be one of the biggest things on TV, and people still try and emulate them and everything. The reality is that most people do not feel that they connect with that. And so on a lot of levels, what we're finding is that books that star more normal, quote unquote people who have, maybe a boring job, or, they're not the super rich, are doing much better in terms of sales and, how many people are reading them than books that have the super rich. And it's just kind of an interesting trend because, you're talking about the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is very much about the super rich, but that's not who you're following. You're following somebody from the districts who's, kind of going through this system. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why that works so well. But that was my point. That was what I missed.
Moreover, the people in the districts are not the ones watching the super rich. It's the super rich watching people from the districts kill
Yes.
each other. When the people from the districts get to the capital, they are lost. It's a completely different world. And so I can understand why books about the super rich might not be doing as well, because it's a completely different world, and most of the population is not super rich.
Yeah.
So that's immediately one distancing factor, one mark against your book that you're wanting people to read and identify with. I wish that publishers were more willing to take risks with the kinds of books that they publish, though. Same with the film industry, because there's a market for a lot of different kinds of characters. There's a market for so many different kinds of characters, and what what I think happens is that one book that has a character that people in the publishing industry didn't expect to do well. Like there was an original strong female character, urban fantasy story, and now they're all strong female characters because that did well, and then the next one did well, and publishers realized we can have women be badasses and people will like it, so we can do this now. So this is another thing we're going to do. Octavia Butler might be shelved with sci-fi now, but her characters are primarily African American, so they were always shoved actually with the Black people section of bookstores, which had so many different genres and types of books, but they had Black people in them, so therefore it was the Black section.
This is something Hollywood really needs to do.
The original Kings of Comedy was for Black comedians, and it did well, and they realized Black people go to movies. I'm really, like, the Marvel films did well, they realized geeks go to movies.
Yes.
Unfortunately, like, they just introduced the King of Wakanda, an African character, into the
T'Challa.
Avengers, and they're like, I guess since Black people watch movies and we've had enough now, people are following this, we can have a Black superhero movie. I'm still waiting for a Black Widow movie. That's another power society thing
Supposedly
that we should
coming
talk
out.
about.
Yes.
Supposedly coming out.
Supposedly coming out.
Yeah, however, it's been
How
shoved to
many
the
movies
backside
in?
of the MCU. Come
How many
on.
movies in are we though?
Yeah, how about a Wonder Woman movie while we're at it?
That's something that like
about
we
it?
should be thinking about, even if it doesn't come out in our writing necessarily.
Yeah.
But being aware that even in our society, there are still imbalances between genders, between there's a we need diverse books movement going on right now because people of color, characters who are not necessarily straight, white, and male, can be main characters and people will love them.
There's a push for diverse authors,
Mm-hmm.
not just books, because, you know,
I
there was
think
a
that's
call
even
put
better.
out for diverse books. So a ton of white authors started writing Black characters, but
Yes.
that's not necessarily what they were looking for. So now there's been a call for diverse authors, so that you have what's kind of considered a more authentic voice.
When I started writing the novel that I'm working on finishing now, it stars two women of color who were in a lesbian relationship, and I started this years ago. And when I
It's a good
started it,
story.
I was like, there's no way anyone's going to publish it. Like, ideally, it would be published by a big house, but it's never going to happen because they're going to tell me make one of these a white male, and why do they both have to be of color, and why do they both have to be, dating someone of the same gender? Like, there were so many strikes against it immediately upon the starting point. And now I think publishers and film companies and TV shows, except that they canceled Agent Carter, are realizing that other people like entertainment media too. So there's a little bit more of an opportunity now. Jen was pointing it out to me actually.
Yeah,
Like-
there's a call in at least the Twitter agent community that they're asking for diverse protagonists.
Yep.
Which is what Brad said. That also comes back to kind of the girl who asked the question about writing a character in a wheelchair to me. The second part of my question I posed to all of you was, should she do it at all? And I think you all agreed by giving her advice that she should try. She should do her best to authentically try. But the scenario that was just described of a bunch of people who are not Black characters writing Black characters and having that inauthenticity sort of spoil it. Just like how does the balance there between try your best and let the people who know what they're doing do it?
I do want to point out though, in Brad's example, they were writing these stories because agents wanted them. So it
Yes.
wasn't something that started inside themselves that needed to be told. It was, I can make money doing this, so I'm gonna do that. And depending on your views of being a writer, that may not be the best place to start from in any story.
I would argue that that is absolutely the case. Never start from the trend is requiring me to write this kind of novel, because it'll come off as being sort of a chore.
Great characters, I think, can come from great imaginations. One of the greatest characters in Charles Dickens, for example, which we talked about a little earlier, was Miss Havisham. Now, I'm pretty sure that Charles Dickens never was jilted at the altar and that he wasn't a lady who sat around in her wedding dress for 40 years with her wedding spread out on the table in front of her. But she's sure a character I'm not going to forget.
Uh-huh.
that's what books are made up of mini characters, and most books don't need, unless you're writing like even a military book maybe, you don't want all your characters to be exactly the same. So if a white male is writing a book, no, every character in his book should not be white male. So, you know, there is that wheelchair person. Is she the main character of the story? Is she, I'm to the point is there are different parts to play. Is it a first-person narrative from that person's point of view? Why is the person in a wheelchair? Are they paralyzed since the age of 10, or did they just get in a car accident and it's a brand new thing? I mean, most people are the same race and ethnicity their whole lives, but especially something with disability, that comes and goes.
Well, what it comes down to, I personally believe in the philosophy that any writer who really puts their mind to it could probably write anything. You know, if you're a good enough writer, you should be able to do this. But it comes about writing from authenticity. It comes about writing something that's true. So do your research. Know what you're doing. Stay away from the stereotypes. You know, we've kind of touched on it throughout this episode, and I think the answer to the question is, as long as you are authentic with what you're doing, do what you want to do. I would never want anyone to hold back and say you can't write an African American character because you're not African American. You know, or I can't write a woman because I'm not a woman. You know, like if we go down that road where it's kind of a slippery slope where you're going to be stuck in kind of these, you know, not that women don't write great women, they probably write better women than I do. But I'd like to believe that if I really put my heart into figuring it out, do the research, put my heart into the character, that I can write a woman. So, you know, I think it's that be authentic to the character.
Also important to think about is your readers' automatic assumptions when they're reading. If you ever want to play a trick on a reader, use a first person and start telling your story, and then make it turn out the main character's black or Asian or a woman. You know, and the reader will probably be startled because most people, given the literary canon we have in America and what we're told to read in school, which are written by dead white men starring white people of a certain class, that's become most people's default when reading first person. It's that, you know, white male protagonist. And so if you ever want to have your readers question their own assumptions when they're reading, do that.
Rue
It'll
from the
shake
Hunger
some people
Games.
up, and it'll be good for everyone.
Yes.
Rue from the
Or,
Hunger Games. I mean, we've been
Dean.
talking about it, yeah, but you know, the stink that was made about that movie because Rue was black, and it's like
stated outright
And
that she's
Dumbledore
black.
is gay, and they were
Yeah.
like, "What? That's impossible because he's not your whatever."
yeah,
Yes.
I don't know. I have a problem with that because it was in the book.
Like, if it's not directly addressed in the book, but it's in the author's head, then people are always surprised that it's different from how they assumed everybody looked, and that's something to think about as a writer.
Yeah, but in the
Well,
Hunger
fine.
Games, it was in the book.
For final thought?
Oh, well,
Go
okay.
ahead.
For final thought, I want to answer my own question with my own example. Fault in Our Stars was written by John Green. He is not a young woman with cancer. But he's been trying to write that book. That's like, I would say that that's his greatest work so far. But he's been trying to write that book for many years because he spent a lot of time working, I believe he was a pastor in a children's cancer ward. Like, he knew Hazels, so many Hazels, and he wanted to tell her story. She's based on an actual person, and he helped publish her diary as well, because she died of cancer. So that had a lot of emotion in it. I mean, he had love and respect for this young girl. I wanted to write her story, but not her story, because she could only tell her story. But he wanted to write a story that was respectful and authentic and important to be told from the point of view of someone that people need to understand. And even though he wasn't Hazel, he had the background, the research, the respect, the love, the passion to write her authentically. And she is a fantastic character that I feel like taught me something about being in those shoes that I would never learn otherwise. So there's my final thoughts.
Good final thought.
Very good one. And on that note, tune in next week for yet another interesting tale in the writing industry. Have a great week writing.
Do you have a new book coming out? Do you have a book series that you wish others knew about? Promote your books or author services on Right Pack Radio. Visit www.windingtrailsmedia.com or email us at advertising@windingtrailsmedia.com. Thank you for listening. Next week on Right Pack Radio, the Right Pack will explore bad guys and sleazy protagonists. The music for this segment was brought to you by Purple Planet, which can be found at www.purple-planet.com. All copyrights belong with them. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.